Hey guys, welcome back to Living the Low Carb Life with Corey. I'm Corey and I'm going to go over 7 quick tips on how to get started with your low carb life. These are just things that have been really helpful for me in my journey, and hopefully they can help you as well. So let's get started. Alright, so tip number 1 is just keep it simple. When you're searching low carb things, you might see all these crazy recipes. I've done a few myself, the low carb bagels, things like that. Don't start off with those things. When you're starting, keep it simple. So just start off with things like veggies that you know are low carb, meats. Most meats are 0 carbs or very, very low carb. Cheeses, eggs, lots and lots of eggs. When you're starting, don't focus on sugar substitutes. So when you're starting the first couple weeks, try to avoid any sort of sugar substitute. So don't worry about things like sugar-free chocolates, things like that. Try to just focus on real, whole, clean foods. Tip number 2 is join groups and channels. There's no better way to be successful than to have support. If you're not comfortable asking your family for support, you can always go online. Obviously, follow and subscribe to my channel, Living the Low Carb Life with Corey. You're welcome to leave comments and ask questions, and I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. A group that I'm on Facebook, if you're in Canada, is called Loyal to Low Carb Canada. It's been really, really helpful. There's lots of great files in the group about low carb foods and carb counts and things like that. It's really easy to follow, and just like any other Facebook group, you can post a question and typically it's answered pretty quickly. You can also just use YouTube searches, Google searches, and Pinterest. So use the resources around you, join groups, and follow channels. All right, tip number 3 for getting started. Learn how to read labels. You've probably heard this before, but when I'm talking about reading labels, I'm referring to only the carbohydrate intake that's posted on the label. So I'm going to give you a couple examples really quickly so that you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so right here I have a box of just regular crackers. There's nothing fancy about these. We used to enjoy these quite a bit before starting low carb, and you'll see in a minute why we don't have these anymore. So if you take a look here, you're going to want to follow the area on the nutrition facts that says carbohydrate. So this one says 14 grams of carbohydrates per serving. So a serving size is about 10 crackers. So as you can see, that's quite a lot, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But the next thing you want to do is subtract your fibers. So you're going to take that 14 grams of carbs minus 2. So the total carb count for this, the total net carb, is 12 grams of carbs. Keep that in mind. Next, we're going to look at one of our favorite snacks, which is just a bag of almonds. These are from Costco. They're really, really tasty, and they're great for low carb. So if we take a look here at the nutrition facts, again, we're going to look for carbohydrates. There they are. Sorry about that glare. And you'll see these are 6 grams of carbs. Now what we're going to do is subtract the fiber, which is 3 grams, and that works out to 3 grams of carbs per quarter cup serving. So that's a really, really great snack to have. So that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about reading the labels. You're just going to look up the carb, subtract the fiber, and always check the serving size. Okay, so piggybacking on tip number 3, tip number 4 is all about the carb count. So you've probably heard me talk about a carb count a couple times, even in this video. And I'm sure you've heard other people, if they're doing low carb, talk about carb count as well. So when I'm talking about carb count, I'm referring to the number of grams of carbs in an individual item. So as I said with those almonds, they ended up being 3 net grams of carbs, which is just your carbohydrate minus the fiber. That's your net carb. So that's what we want to focus on when we're doing low carb, is the net carb. So typically when you're following a low carb diet, you want to stick to around 20 or 25 grams of net carbs in a day. So for a lot of people, that's going to be quite a drastic change, because when you're looking at things like the crackers, that was 12 grams of carbs for only 10 crackers. So you can see that, it's not difficult to get up to 100, 150 grams of carbs easily in a day. So when I started with my low carb journey, my goal was to get around 50 grams of carbs a day. So for me, that was a really good starting off point. I was able to cut out my breads, pasta, sugar, rice, things like that. So this is totally up to you how much you want to start with, but again, the ideal is around 20 grams of carbs a day. But like I said, when I was starting out, I did more around the 40 to 50 grams of carbs a day. All right, tip number 5 is water. Make sure you are drinking your water. You want to aim for about half your weight. So let's say you're 200 pounds. So half your weight is 100 pounds. Transfer that into ounces, and you want to have about 100 ounces of water in a day. So 100 ounces roughly works out to about 12 and a half cups of water in a day. If you just work away at it, maybe get a fancy water bottle, it's totally doable. And trust me, water is so good for you, and it'll definitely help with your weight loss if that's what your focus is. The one thing to try to avoid with water when you're just starting is the water flavoring. And I know they're so tempting, and if you read the label, it says 0 carbs, but there is sugar in there, so when you're starting, just try to stick with regular water. Tip number 5 is tracking. What you want to do when you're doing low carb is track your net carbs. So how you do that is up to you. There's a couple of great ways you can do it though. Lots of people like to use apps. A great app to use for carb tracking is MyFitnessPal. It's free, it's very user-friendly, and it tells you exactly how many carbs are in things. Just keep in mind though, it doesn't separate the net carbs, so you'll want to keep track of that yourself. If you're more of a paper and pen sort of person, perhaps you have a bullet journal. You can totally keep track just on paper and pen as well. I used to keep track on my fridge. I just had a notepad and would scribble down my carbs for the day to help me visually see it, and then also keep track of it. But like I said, with the bullet journal, there's, tons of different ways to make fun little tracking systems to keep track of your carbs and, give you something fun to do too. Lastly, tip number 7 is give yourself grace. I know it's really difficult sometimes, especially if you're a perfectionist or somebody who likes to have things just so, but try not to be so hard on yourself. This is a journey. If it's something that you're completely not used to, getting rid of carbs is hard enough, so be gentle on yourself. Don't stress out too much if you're struggling. It's a learning curve, it takes time, and if you are treating this as a way of life or a lifestyle change, then you'll want to allow yourself to have, a little bit of grace, especially in the beginning, and take your time with it. All right, so for a quick recap, the 7 tips that I have for you today for starting on the low carb life is keep it simple, join groups and channels online, learn how to read labels, learn about the carb count, drink lots and lots of water, make sure you're tracking, and lastly, give yourself grace. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully this has inspired you to get started on your low carb journey, or perhaps it'll give you a new spark if you've kind of stumbled a little bit. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you found that it's helpful, and be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.